Oh yeah, what's going on, GameLeapers? This is Coach Cheese, and in today's upload, we're going to be covering the 15 best champions of patch 12.10. And 12.10 has been out for at least 24 hours in pretty much every single region, so we're taking all of the new data that we have, all of the stats, and we've compiled together a list that is going to give you 3 of the most broken champions for each role. It's just in a top 15 countdown, so you guys can make your own list out of these champions. These just have the best win rates in terms of how much they've been played, and this is for all ranks as well. So even if you're a higher elo player or a lower elo player, you will all benefit from this. And to master any of these champions, guys, as always, make sure you check out the GameLeap website in the description and comment section, because our challenger players and coaches are uploading a bunch of videos every single week, and these might be high elo VOD analyses, they might be champion courses or guides. They're guaranteed to help you improve and peak on the Rift. So check those out down below, and let's get into the countdown. So we're going to start with the supports, and the first of these, this is Janna. And for Janna and a lot of the enchantresses at the moment in the bot lane, the new patch is proving to be a really juicy one. So in over 18,000 games, and remember, this is in all ranks. So every single game that's been played on Janna, you have over a 53% chance of winning, which is pretty nuts. And the reason for this is because the game is more scaling. You're going to get to the 30-minute mark in most of them, and this is why Janna is incredibly good. Just make sure to run Revitalize in your runes, because we are about empowering our teammates, and the shield from our Eye of the Storm, which we are maxing first. And also make sure to take Shirelia's, the mythic passive, the ability haste, really useful. Now following Janna, we have a champion who's played twice as much, but has almost just as good a win rate, and this is Brand. And I understand that Brand in higher elos might not be that favorable to pick, but in lower elos, and because of the durability changes in 12.10, where champions are just beefier and have more HP, for a champion like Brand with his innate tick damage, and also once you get Liandra's Anguish, you'll be dealing even more damage than before. So if you want to press R and win games, Brand is definitely the support to pick. But the best support of the bunch, guys, this is still Senna, who in over 100,000 matches, over a 53% win rate. This is pretty nuts, and the reason Senna is so good is because of the scaling she has from her passive from the Wraith stats. Because like I said, the games are going to last longer, and for a scaling champion like Senna, it is just unreal. You're going to get more range, more damage, the 20% slowing your Q is still there, and then by taking Fleet and then Revitalize, which is really going to help with your ultimate and your Piercing Darkness, it's just too good a setup. So if Senna is open, you should definitely think about picking up. Now we'll stay in the bot lane here and talk about the AD carries who are doing really well at the moment. Now the first of these is a champion who was doing well before the changes, this being Lucian. And thanks to the scaling that he's now got, so his AD per level got buffed a few patches ago, and also the AD ratio in his Vigilance passive. And if you pair Lucian with an Enchantress, who are very good right now because of the new scaling meta, Lucian actually has good scaling. So I know lots of people think he's still an early game champion, and he kind of still is, but you can now deal as much damage in the late game as well, so an awesome all-around AD carry. But a champion who is statistically outperforming Lucian, this is Vayne. And I kind of predicted before this patch that Vayne was going to be kind of bonkers, and the reason for this is because of her true damage and her ability to shred tanks. Like I said, because there's more HP in the game, Vayne is going to froth this. This is why in over 85,000 solo queue games, there is at least a 53% win rate. Just be sure to max your W and you will be sweet. But an AD carry even better than Vayne at the moment, this is Kogmaw. And I also mentioned Kogmaw in our predictions videos because of his on-hit damage. He is going to love playing against or playing in a tankier meta. By maxing your Bio Arcane Barrage and getting a Ginsu's, then a Runar's Hurricane, Wit's End maybe, which will give you more on-hit damage, it is just a great synergy. And what's also interesting, a little setup you guys can try out, is to take Titanic Hydra and pair this with Overgrowth in your runes, because the HP you get from Overgrowth will actually trigger Titanic Hydra's passive, where the bonus HP you get, it will convert into AD. It also makes you harder to kill because the HP is really useful, so Kogmaw is the #1 ADC at the moment for 12.10. So now let's head into the mid lane and talk about the best performers here, and we're starting off with Talia. And you can see that in over 27,000 matches, Talia, once again another champion, has at least a 53% win rate. Now the changes to Talia a couple of patches ago, so her wave clear is better because of her new Q. The W also stops champions from dashing, which is really useful in teamfights and during the laning phase. And because now you're more of a scaler when you play her in the mid lane, which is why you can definitely think about running Transcendence in your runes, she is an excellent pick at the moment. As far as your items go though, just make sure to take Everfrost as your keystone, because you can synergize this with your Seismic Shove, but just make sure you pair Everfrost with Sorc Shoes and then Shadow Flame, because we really need the magic penetration to actually one-shot. Everfrost won't give us enough power, it's giving us utility, so that's important as well. But Talia is definitely one of the top mid laners, but Talia is bettered at the moment by a champion who's been so good for all of Season 12, this being Vega. And I think we know why. The Q stacking in a meta where games are going to last longer, it just sounds even more ideal. But the build is staying the the same. So Everfrost, Sork Shoes, Ravenous, Deathcap, and as far as what you're maxing first, your skill order, obviously it's your Q, then followed by your event horizon. This is really important to max your E second because we want to reduce the cooldown as much as possible. And maybe one recommendation is to run Gathering Storm in your runes because this is going to enhance our scaling even more. And when you pair this with Transcendence, which is kind of doing the same thing, as the game progresses, you're getting more ability haste. So Veigar's value might not be that great in the early game, but you're pretty much guaranteed to get to 2 to 3 items these days, and that's when you can take over. But the number one mid laner, this might be a little surprise to some of you, but this is actually Anivia with over a 55% win rate. Yes, you heard me correct, 55%, and that's in close to 20,000 games. And the main reason for this is because of Liandry's Anguish. Just like I mentioned for Brand, the extra HP in the game is actually going to indirectly buff any champion that can make use of Liandry's. And you can see when you go Sork Shoes, Liandry's, and then Archangel's Staff, because we do need the mana, you win over 61% of games. And remember, this is across the board. So this just goes to show us how good Anivia is because of the new meta and how well Liandry's Anguish interacts with it. Just make sure to max your Frostbite, and the great thing about this is that the double damage is still proccing off your Q even if it just clips an enemy champion. So Anivia is actually the number one mid laner and might even be the best champion in the game. Now speaking of good champions, let's head to the jungle here and talk about Master Yi, who's the first one we have to mention because in over 60,000 games. Again, another champion with over a 53% win rate. And the big reason for this, just look at his items for me, is because of Kraken Slayer, the true damage, and then Ginsu's Rage Blade. The on-hit, the damage you have, the tank shred, it is going to be insane. And because you run lethal tempo and you're going to be tankier yourself and fights are going to last longer, it should be super easy for Master Yi players to get to max stacks of tempo, the extra attack speed, the extra range. It is deadly, and it's very hard anyway to peel a Master Yi off your backline. And you can see that Master Yi is banned in over a quarter of the games at the moment. That's how good he is. Now for the next jungler, we have Wukong, who is still popping off. And you might be like, well, Wukong, shouldn't he be worse because tanks are better? Well, Wukong is a champion who builds Divine Sunder. And these champions love it when there's more HP in the game because of the Spellblade passive. And then when we pair this with Conqueror, which should be easier to get to max stacks, kind of like I said for Master Yi with Lethal Tempo, it's a very OP combo. Just make sure if you are picking Wukong to obviously max your Q first and then your E. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Close to a 54% win rate right at the top of the pile. Well, not quite actually, because there is a surprise champion, guys, who is the number one jungler in the game, an actual champion based on win rate. And this is Shyvana, and just look at these stats for me. 29,000 games and a 58.5% win rate. That is one of the most absurd win rates I've seen for ages, and a big reasoning for this is because of the build. With Frostfire Gauntlet and then Demonic Embrace. Pair this with the meta at the moment that's going to be scaling. That is what your build is. Frostfire Gauntlet's mythic passive, where it's giving you extra HP for each major item you have. It pairs so well with Demonic Embrace's passive. And Shiv, don't forget, got buffs earlier in the season to her ability Power Iteration. So with an Emax, you deal so much damage, and because you're going to scale into a game more often, this champion, to be honest, is just the number one pick right now and is giga broken. Now, of course, the last role we have to cover, guys, is the top lane, and all of these champions have one thing in common. They either run Conqueror or Lethal Tempo, which might not be that surprising because it is top lane after all. But these champions, the first one, this is Mordekaiser, and when you pair Conqueror with Riftmaker, it's a very nice little harmony here because Riftmaker is stacking and Conqueror is stacking too. And just because of how the meta has actually changed, for Mordekaiser as a scaling AP bruiser, he is benefiting so much from this already. And this is why in over 50,000 matches, he has close to a 53% win rate, which is very respectable indeed. But a champion who's performing, you might even say, at a much higher level, this is Lillia. So in over 8,500 matches, a 55.7% win rate. And if you look down at the bottom for me, this is because of that item again, Liandry's Anguish, and its synergy with then Demonic Embrace. And we've seen this before, right, with Anivia. Liandry's Anguish just boasts so much value in the current state of the game. And for a Conqueror stacking champion like Lillia, so Anivia, you're going Electrocute, this is even better for you as a top laner. Just make sure if you are going to play Lillia in the top lane, you are maxing your Q and then your W, and you will understand why this champion is so good at the moment. But the best top laner, and we could have even included this champion in the mid lane, this is Kayle. And just like I mentioned for these other champions, Lethal Tempo on Kayle. And when you pair this with Nash's 2 from Riftmaker and Deathcap, the on-hit damage, the DPS, which is really important, so the damage per second, you beat every single champion in the game. So if you can get to level 11 and then level 16, which will happen more often because of the new meta, Kayle is just the cream of the crop, the best of the bunch, and she's only banned in 5% of games. Master Yi, who doesn't perform as well, is banned in over 25%. So those were the 15 most broken updated champions, guys, for 12.10 based on the stats that have come out in the last day or so. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, remember to leave a like down below. Also hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future daily uploads. And this has been Coach. Peace.